You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to an emergency edition of the Greeks Gridiron. I am Ethan Haristadoulou, and today, a day after we typically post an episode, a ton of news dropping about two teams, the Giants, the Patriots, both making some key moves to bolster their rosters. The Patriots going out and signing Stefon Diggs. The Giants, of course, going and getting a quarterback in Russell Wilson. Sounds like they were tired of waiting around for the Aaron Rodgers saga. So, without further ado, we're diving in. We're discussing both topics here. We'll hit the Giants convo first. We'll do Patriots second here. So let me hear from you all. Thoughts, opinions on the moves. How does this affect the Giants draft plans? What does this mean for QB1 in New York? And then on the flip side for the Patriots, how does Stefon Diggs fit into the fold over there in New England? We're going to discuss it all. But first, beginning with, of course, the Giants. Russell Wilson joining the fray in New York. This is one that I'll be honest, I was kind of starting to think was where we were heading in the direction here. Adam Schefter with the big tweet breaking the news last night. The Giants and Super Bowl winning quarterback Russell Wilson reached an agreement today on a one-year deal worth up to $21 million, including $10.5 million guaranteed. The 10-time Pro Bowl selection had been in discussions with the Giants, Browns and Steelers, but is opting for New York, where Wilson won Super Bowl 48 in MetLife Stadium. Now Wilson is returning there as the Giants' projected starting quarterback. Now, this is, I would say, exciting if you're a Giants fan. It puts you in a much better situation at the quarterback spot. But I will say this, the offense as a whole now, with Russell Wilson under center, looks a lot better. And for what it's worth, with where Russell Wilson's career has gone over the last few years, I would say these last two seasons weren't terrible. Maybe this last season in Pittsburgh wasn't as good as maybe the year prior in Denver, because that second season he had in Denver was not bad at all. But this past season in Pittsburgh, whether it was just issues within the building, maybe just a scheme fit, whatever it may be, things started to taper off towards the tail end of the season. But there were flashes in the pan for Russell. So now coming into New York, you have Russell Wilson at quarterback. Your running back room features Tyrone Tracy, who stood out last year, and of course Devin Singletary, a reliable running back number 2 for the roster there. Wide receiver room consists of Malik Neighbors, obviously the young and up-and-coming stud. You went and re-signed Darius Slayton, and then of course Wan'Dale Robinson, the second-round pick from a few years ago. And then your tight end room headlined by Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger. There, in my eyes, does need to be some improvements to the offensive side of things for Russell Wilson, to really maximize what he is able to do in New York. And I do have a feeling that gets addressed in the draft. But as of the way things stand right now, they've gone out, they've tried to work on some things, make the offense somewhat competent as it struggled mightily last year. And I do think bringing in Russell Wilson and, of course, Jameis Winston as the backup quarterback is a good step in the right direction. It sounds like all options are on the table as far as who actually starts. Russell Wilson is kind of the projected starter by everyone right now, expected to be that quarterback one. But the way the Giants have made it sound, it's going to be pretty much an open competition. And I mean, the way it stands, you have Russell, you have Jameis, you also have Tommy DeVito that's on there as well as QB3. And from the sounds of it, this does not mean that the Giants won't be taking a quarterback in this year's draft. I will say I do think it maybe slightly alters when they take a quarterback, but if we go ahead and we take a look at this report here from Jordan Raanan of ESPN, he had an article that came out immediately following the news here. The eventual signing of Russell Wilson, 36, does not eliminate the possibility of the Giants taking a quarterback in next month's NFL draft. New York currently holds the number 3 pick, and owner John Mara said at the end of this past season that the team's top priority and number 1 issue was to find a quarterback of the future. Wilson, Winston, and DeVito aren't on long-term deals. And if you would ask me, none of those 3 guys are long-term answers at the quarterback position here, considering where Tommy DeVito is at this stage in his young career. He's had some flashes, but in my eyes, and I would assume the Giants' eyes as well, he is not a quarterback one, a great backup, a guy that you can rely on to come in and start for you if need be. Russell Wilson, obviously being 36 on the tail end of his career, can only imagine he only has a handful of seasons left in him. Jameis Winston, the old 30 for 30 quarterback, you never really know, super high ceiling but super low floor at the same time. It's very hit or miss with what you get out of him. The quarterback of the future is not currently on the roster. Now, as I just kind of alluded to before we talked about that article there, I will say that it does, in my eyes, alter what happens in the draft as to where they take a quarterback. A lot of people were tying them to Shedeur Sanders at number 3, but I do think this signing of Russell Wilson does express some doubt that the Giants may have of either Shedeur Sanders' ability or Shedeur Sanders' availability to them at number 3. That's what I would probably say about this here. I do think there's still a chance if Shedeur is on the board at number 3, say the Cleveland Browns, instead of opting for a quarterback, go after Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. And it seems like the consensus right now is that Cam Ward is probably going to be a Tennessee Titan come the start of that NFL draft. I would like to say that I think it's possible Shedeur Sanders does still go to New York. I do think that would cause a little bit of a media circus if you're going after and picking him at number 3 and you have 3 other quarterbacks on your roster. Someone's going to obviously have to be let go, probably even 2 guys, because it would be interesting if they carried 3 quarterbacks into the season. I mean, you'd say DeVito, Winston, probably the odd man out, but then Russell Wilson, if he's there for a backup job, like that would be interesting. Or what I'm starting to think is more the likely scenario. It sounds like and seems like there is a chance that maybe the Giants are a little more interested in that like second tier of quarterbacks than maybe everyone initially thought. Jackson Dart is picking up a ton of steam right now. A lot of people seem to like him from Ole Miss, and of course the Giants have some familiarity taking an Ole Miss quarterback and having a ton of success there. You also have guys like Quinn Ewers. You have Will Howard from Ohio State, Kyle McCord, who played in New York himself. So there are some options there in that like next tier of quarterbacks that if you're fine with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston leading the quarterback room, Tommy DeVito then becomes the odd man out. You go and you get one of those guys in day 2, maybe in rounds 2 or 3, and you develop them behind Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. And honestly, that's not a bad quarterback room to be learning from, considering one of them, Super Bowl champion, 3rd round selection. He has experience going through adversity and finding his way to an ultimate championship. And then you have somebody like Jameis Winston, who he's experienced what it's like to be that top pick in the draft, to have all the pressure and expectations on him coming into the NFL. 2 guys that I think a young quarterback, whether it's somebody taken at number 3 or if it's somebody taken in that 2nd or 3rd round, could absolutely learn from. So in my eyes, the way it kind of looks right now, it may be that the Browns are possibly more in on Shedeur Sanders than some people are reporting or just even realize at this current stage, and maybe the Giants feel like there's a chance that he's not going to be there. I'm not really surprised, though, about this signing. I will say that. I mean, I've been kind of pounding the table about this for the last couple of weeks, that Aaron Rodgers going to the Pittsburgh Steelers makes the most sense to me. And while, yes, the Giants have been aggressively, I would say, targeting quarterbacks. They were in on Matthew Stafford. They were trying to make some things happen, but ultimately they had to settle in on Russell Wilson because Aaron Rodgers, if he's not going to Pittsburgh, I assume he's going to just opt to retire, because you need to be on a team that can win right now. And while I don't want to sound like I'm ragging on the Giants on this one here, I don't necessarily know if this is a team that's winning a Super Bowl next year with or without Aaron Rodgers, or now with or without Russell Wilson at the helm. They still have a lot of work to do as a team overall. The defense is pretty good. They're young and up and coming group of guys over there on that side of the ball, but the offense is still very much an unknown right now. Yes, you have Brian Daboll, who is a renowned quarterback whisperer, and maybe he can make some magic happen with Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, or the eventual rookie quarterback that they bring in. But it all remains to be seen. I think it's a little less of a sure thing, whereas the Steelers, it feels like they're competent quarterback play away from being a legitimate Super Bowl contender rather than a team that's just winning 10 games and getting knocked out of the first round of the playoffs. So I'm not really surprised that this is the way this all shook out. I kind of felt like this is kind of the direction that this was heading towards. I did assume that they were probably picking a quarterback at number 3. So I'm not surprised Russell ended up here, but I'm surprised that they went and got Russell Wilson, if that makes sense. Like, Russell Wilson was the logical option to me as far as bringing in another veteran if they did so choose to. But I'm also a little bit shocked because I really thought that they were going all in on Shedeur. But this tells me that maybe there is some doubt in New York's mind, again, whether it's ability or availability of Shedeur Sanders and him being the number 3 selection in the draft. It sounds like that there's a good chance that maybe Cleveland's looking at Shedeur a little bit harder than some people are realizing. So we'll see where it all goes. I'm really looking forward to seeing how this all plays out. I think Russell Wilson in New York should be good for them. Jameis Winston, obviously, in the room as well. Tommy DeVito feels like the odd man out, and I don't think this changes whether the Giants draft a quarterback or not. I just ultimately think it alters when they draft a quarterback. So it's not a matter of when, but more so if than anything else. The other piece of news and discussion we got to get ourselves into here, the New England Patriots going and getting themselves a wide receiver 1, a much needed wide receiver 1. We can go ahead and take a look at some of the tweets here that we're blasting out. Adam Schefter, again, getting a lot of screen time today. Free agent wide receiver Stefon Diggs reaching an agreement on a 3-year, $69 million deal, including $26 million guaranteed with the New England Patriots. He then had another follow-up tweet afterwards that I thought was interesting here because there was some uncertainty surrounding this scenario as well. New Patriots wide receiver Stefon Diggs, who's coming off of a torn ACL suffered in Week 8 versus the Colts last season, is on track to return for Week 1 of the upcoming season. It was another reason the Patriots felt comfortable giving Diggs the 3-year, $69 million deal that GM Elliott Wolf and Diggs agent Adisa Bakari, I believe is how that's pronounced, of the Sports ENT Group negotiated here. So, with all that being said, this one in my eyes makes a ton of sense. Yes, Stefon Diggs is coming off that torn ACL. Yes, he's going to be 32 in the upcoming season. I believe in November is when his birthday is. I get all that. I completely understand maybe the concern. And also, there's people that are worried about his character and all of that. I understand all of that. But the reality is that Stefon Diggs is somebody who made his mark, made his name in the NFL because he is one of the best route runners in the league at what he does. Sure, he's probably lost a step. Maybe he's not nearly as athletic as he was when he was 24, 25, 26 years old, especially now more so coming off of that torn ACL. We'll see what he looks like in this first year back. It always takes, it feels like, especially at the skill position guys, like about a year or so to really get back to form. So if it's a 3-year deal and Stefon Diggs is around in 2026, that's going to be more so the true form that you're going to see from Stefon. But this isn't about him being the break the top off the defense type of stuff. This is a guy that in Josh McDaniel's system, who he's known for having a very complicated, nuanced system where it benefits from having guys who can run the entire route tree. Stefon Diggs is literally that guy. And when you look at this wide receiver room behind Stefon Diggs, you're looking at Kendrick Bourne, Demario Douglas, Kayshon Boutte. Douglas and Boutte, I will say, more so Douglas than Boutte, but Douglas definitely showing some flashes here and there, especially last season. Boutte had a few big plays himself, but then you're looking at like Mac Hollins, who feels somebody who's played with McDaniels, so he has the experience in that system and someone that will probably help with just the culture reestablishing that's going on in New England. But then like Javon Baker, who is a guy I couldn't even find the field last season. Jalen Polk, who a lot of people are making a lot of jokes about for having stone hands. You have also Jaquan Jackson and John Giles, two guys I didn't even know were on the roster. No offense to them. I just didn't know until I finally went to go look at the entire wide receiver room last night as this news was breaking. So the wide receiver room definitely needed an upgrade and desperately needed an upgrade. And I think that Stefon Diggs, even if he is an aging guy coming off of an injury, he's someone whose skill set fits what New England's going to need from them. And I don't think this ends like marks the end of the upgrades to the wide receiver room. What it does do is allows this team to now really go into the draft and go after best available at basically every single selection. Because at this point, the only thing they have not really addressed is the left tackle position, which it feels like that is going to be how they address round number 1. It's going to be a tackle, whether it's going to be a Will Campbell or an Armand Membu or somebody else of the likes, maybe a Josh Simmons if you're willing to roll the dice on him because he'd be tackle number 1 if he didn't sustain his injury last year. it sounds like tackle in the first round, and then you fill out the rest of the roster with best available from there. Whether they wind up being able to trade back or not obviously remains to be seen. A lot of people have their doubts about whether they will even be able to or have an offer. As far as I'm concerned, at this stage now, with Stefon Diggs on the roster, you take whatever you're willing to get. Even if you don't feel like the haul is that great, any sort of extra selections giving you another extra hit or two in the draft is only going to benefit the Patriots. So at this point, I think a trade back and taking somebody like Membu or Simmons makes a lot of sense in my eyes. But that just seems like the direction they can now go, because they've addressed wide receiver. They're probably going to draft another one. They're probably going to address the O-line a few times. There's maybe, a defensive player or two they're targeting, but it's going to be a lot of retooling the O-line, adding an additional wide receiver, and just creating more competition within a wide receiver room that desperately needs it, because I don't really think by any means this group is solidified at all. And the one thing that it's really funny to keep going back to is just winning that game in Week 18 against the Buffalo Bills really screwed over the Patriots. I don't think that's been amplified enough at times. If they lose that game, they hold the keys to the number one pick. They're getting whoever they want. They control the draft. They're probably trading out of the number one spot because of just their team needs and their team structure, because Tennessee's going to desperately want Cam Ward, as they are clearly very much in on him right now. There's a team that's probably desperate to get a Travis Hunter, an Abdul Carter, or maybe they really like Shador. Like, those top four guys in the draft are top four guys for a reason this year, and they don't necessarily need those top four guys specifically. Like, they could absolutely use them, but they don't necessarily need them. Their biggest need right now, based off everything that's happened, has been left tackle, and you don't need to be picking at number one for that. So it's unfortunate they're not, because you probably get a really good haul for that number one pick, but obviously beating the Bills in Week 18, man, oh man, did that set you back this year. And it's crazy to think that going from pick number 1 to pick number 4 set the Patriots that far back as far as how this draft outlook is going. The other thing I want to address here is just the character concerns, because there's been so much conversation about this regarding Stefon Diggs and whether anyone should be worried about this or not. And in my eyes, I've kind of felt like this for a while, no, but it's nice to see that there are people who have been with Stefon Diggs that are basically coming out of the woodwork to defend this guy and ultimately praise the fire and competitive nature that he brings to the game here. Albert Breer had a really good article that he put out a couple of days ago, just going over a number of different things. Stefon Diggs happened to be one of the guys discussed in the article, and just a couple of notes that I pulled from here that I really, really liked about Stefon Diggs and just people coming to his defense. Few notes from that article. Most who've worked with him love him, not like, but love working with him. In fact, those were the extra words I remember getting over text when things first got bumpy for Diggs a couple of years ago. A coach who'd been with him in Buffalo said, "I effing love him." That sentiment isn't rare and kept coming up over the weekend when I asked folks from those who had him in Minnesota to those who were with him in Houston. Next one here reads, "Absolutely," texted one coach who had him as a Viking when asked if he liked working with Diggs. "He's one of the most competitive people you'll ever meet. The guy is a warrior. Loved him," a Texan staffer texted. "Loves football, practices hard and with purpose, wants to be coached, didn't have any of the game day stuff that people talked about. He's a much warmer person than the stigma that follows him. I'll be hopeful about where he lands." This is something that I've kind of felt for a while now going into this offseason, because his stint in Houston by no means was poor. He was looking really good before he went down tearing his ACL. He was extremely productive. He basically got thrusted into a number one role, even though he was supposed to be the number 2 to Nico Collins. And he was doing an excellent job. I believe he was like 7th or 8th, something along those lines, in total receptions of all receivers in the league before he went down with the injury again. And that's as a 31-year-old wide receiver. That's somebody who or I guess 30 at the time. I don't remember exactly when week 8 was last year. Maybe it was right before he turned 31. But again, as a 30-year-old wide receiver, you're 7th in the league in receptions. You're tearing it up because he's an elite route runner. Athleticism was not the do or die for him. It was all about his ability to exploit coverages, being able to create separation because he's such an elite route runner. So you're bringing in a guy who everyone has seemed to love working with, and the biggest issue that he's ever had, when you really break down all the trouble and just like nonsense that's surrounded his diva-like mentality is that he just wants the ball. He wants to produce. He wants to help lead his team to victory. That's not a negative in my eyes. It's not at all. You have a guy that is a competitor, an elite competitor. And when you look at the roster that the Patriots currently have, or at least had coming out of this past season, that's the type of guy that you kind of want on this team right now. So if your biggest concern going into this next season with Stefon Diggs is just making sure that he's getting the football enough, when you look at the rest of your wide receiver room and just what this passing game looked like last season, that is not the worst place to be in my eyes. So I'm excited to see what Stefon Diggs brings to the table. He was basically the juice that really helped catapult Josh Allen to that next level. And while, again, Stefon Diggs a little bit older, hopefully a little bit more savvier, and, we'll have to really rely on his ability to create separation with his route running abilities. I think he can do, even if it's not to the level of Josh Allen, there is going to be something of that similar effect for now Drake May in New England. This is the guy that Drake May desperately needed. And again, I don't think this means they're done adding to the room. I think you're going to see another wide receiver, maybe even two, depending on who is available when the Patriots are drafting, added to the room to really up that competition, because it's a room that desperately needs that competition. So this is something that, listen, it's nothing but a positive. $26 million guaranteed over 3 years is chump change considering what is getting thrown around in the NFL right now for a guy that's going to be the top guy on your roster as far as wide receivers are concerned. This is a win for the Patriots no matter what happens here. I mean, you're literally bringing in a legitimate guy that Drake May will be able to look to on any down, especially a go-to guy on third down that you can trust and get the football out to. Patriots fans, you have every reason to be celebrating the Stefon Diggs signing in my eyes. But wanted to make sure we got in and discussed all that. For those of you who have made it to the end, greatly appreciate it. As always, thank you for joining me today on an emergency episode, a day after we put out our typical show. Catch you all next time. Have a good one.